Good evening, everyone. Warm welcome to the first panel of the Montresso Conversation Cycle at the 154. I'm Montresso from the Montresso Art Foundation. And for those that are not familiar with, it's a hybrid space that aims to support contemporary art and artists through artistic residency Jardin Rouge. So today's panel is a part of the main program of the foundation that's called Indiscipline, and that aims to offer a new view on art through the lens of a group of artists from the same country. So after 3 editions highlighting art from Benin, Ivory Coast, and Congo, we're delighted with this 4th edition to welcome artists from America, but with American descent, to discuss their work within the context of the shaping narratives of Black identity. So here, delighted to introduce Dr. Famo Piku, Gregory Michael Carter, Mike Reese, Abdi Salami. And the conversation will be moderated by Stephanie Fleming, artist and executive director of the Adama Museum of Atlanta. So I hope that you will enjoy the conversation. That will last approximately 50 minutes. Then we'll have 10 minutes for the questions. So yes, enjoy the conversation, and I will hand off to Stephanie. Thank you.
All right, welcome. I just wanted to say 2 seconds of things about ADAMA. So you can find us online, adamatl.org, and it stands for the African Diaspora Art Museum of Atlanta, that is founded by Dr. Famo Piku, and I have the honor of directing. All right, so let's dive into it. I'm going to start with a group question. So all of you, or some of you, whoever wants to respond, and then I have some specific questions for each of you, and then we'll kind of go back to a couple of group questions, and then we'll open it up to anyone who has some extras. All right. So, all right. Each of you offer nuanced pathways to dissecting Blackness. How does your work specifically contribute to perspectives around Blackness and Black identity?
I guess I'll go first. Yeah. First of all, hello everyone. Thank you all for being here. This is super exciting. As mentioned, my name is Dr. Famo Piku. My work has always centered Black identity, and specifically Black male identity. My work interrogates the ways in which we, as a society and as a culture, read Black masculinity in popular culture. And so my work began early on as a kind of critique of the obsession with Black male celebrity and like entertainment, particularly in hip hop culture. And now more and more I'm investigating the ways in which visual culture, media, and other kinds of influences shape and inform the way Black men see themselves, but also the way the world sees Black men. And so I often use myself, or at least use my own body and my own work through performances to interrogate the different kinds of stereotypes and misconceptions about Black masculinity. But by getting inside of these stereotypes, I can kind of explode them from the inside out and force people to like check their preconceived ideas. A lot of times we see, a particular body, a particular person, and we have these ideas based on the ways that, we've seen them in television, et cetera, but that's not necessarily who that person is. So my work is engaged with those kinds of questions.
My work deals in history, and in most cases, correcting the history, this colonial nightmare that I've grown up in. So my work deals with a lot of research, but more recently I've been creating alternative relics that tell a more accurate depiction of our history through, but also through my experiences. So that's what I've been up to.
I'm Michael Reese. Hello, everyone. Thinking about Blackness. Right? Hello. Okay. Yeah, thinking about Blackness and my work. I first think about myself as more of a humanist in that sense, and I happen to be Black, of course. And so, thinking about the ways in which Black people and the Black experience is reduced to a simplicity, and I think when that happens, it's easier to oppress, it's easier to harm, and so what I've thought about in my work is how do I bring the complexity of which I feel I'm walking around with, and which I feel I've seen my family walk around with, and understanding the history of our people. How do I bring that to the surface in the work? And so that is a thread that is connective tissue through all of my work in different ways, and I do different types of work, but a lot of the work is tied to that complexity of, how do we bring this to the surface as Black people, and how I'm seeing myself, as a Black person, and bringing that complexity to the people who are viewing in that are non-Black, and oftentimes don't see that complexity.
On my own, yeah. Hi everyone, Abby Salami here. I was born in Lagos, Nigeria, and moved to the United States. And I moved to the United States when I was 10, and that was the first time I ever realized I was a Black person. My work. Yeah, right, exactly. I was a person before then, and now I'm a Black person, and I was being reminded every day, in every way, of my Blackness. And so with my work, I'm kind of talking about that immigrant experience, living in America, being a Black woman, and the things that we have to go through. I'm very much like you, Michael. I feel like I'm just talking about me, and somehow you guys like what I'm saying, I guess it shows the universality, why can I speak, of the Black experience, despite the fact that we are all so different. Yeah.
I love that. And I think that's something that each of you bring to the table with your works, because you are focused on yourself and your own lived experiences. That does open it up for other people to, they're mirroring your experiences in their own way. So that opportunity to see yourself, or for us to see ourselves in your work, I think is really important. I'm actually going to dive in with Abby first. So exploring Blackness and Black identity, we open a whole other can of worms when it's from the perspective of a Black woman, and womanhood and femininity. So considering your own lived experiences that you're drawing from, and those that you might have witnessed, you're contributing a perspective not just of that Black Southern woman, but also as an immigrant with Nigerian roots. So can you tell us a little bit more about how you draw from those lived experiences or witness perspectives? And then what important offerings can we receive from exploring Black beauty and womanhood in your work?
I think I will ask the last part first. So with the body of work that I created during this residency, when Fahamu told me about Blackness, of course I was like, well, Black woman is a separate thing. And then I have to go deeper, right? And so I was thinking about who's allowed to be feminine, who's allowed to be a woman a lot. And that's kind of what the work's about, kind of reframing femininity for Black women. And I feel like we've been told how to be feminine as a Black woman, and that usually entails being strong and edgy and things that are not necessarily soft and or beautiful necessarily. And I felt, I didn't grow up seeing anything like that. And I feel like as an artist, with the talent I've been given, I can change that narrative. And that's what I was trying to do with the work that I created at Montresso, was kind of create scenes where these women they look like sleeping beauties, they look beautiful, they look peaceful, they look safe, right? Because you're not gonna fall asleep anywhere unless you're safe, right? I mean, you can, but you most of the time you want to like be safe. And I did add elements in there to kind of remind people like this is not a standard thing. Like it is weird that they're sleeping in these places. And the point is about the exhaustion of being a Black woman. Like by the time you're done with everything that society expects of you, do you have time to just be a woman? And most of us don't. I think all women, that's just for all women, but like specifically Black women, the extra mile that we have to go is exhausting. So yeah, hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Michael, so your work extends beyond straight photography and other mediums that you've mentioned as well. So with mark making and different photographic processes like the cyanotype, how does your methodology or your photography become an extension of how you construct your own identity or narrative?
Yeah, I mean, being a photographer, thinking about photography, thinking about where it lives within the context of the rest of the arts. I think photography. Photography is a medium that I think that has had to kind of like claw its way. I don't want to say to the top, but it's had to claw its way to be validated in a sense, to live in the context of painting and sculpture and all those things. And so it's just like a lot of times, I'll say, I'm a photographer, and it's just like, oh, you're a photographer, but you're not an artist, and so I tell people, I'm an artist that happens to be a photographer. And so, and in the same way, I think that identity is tied to that in a sense too. It's I remember early in my career, I got to interview the amazing Roy Decarava. It's really, really amazing. And, he talked about that he never wanted to be called a Black photographer. But I found him by looking up Black photographers. But I understood what he was saying. I understood what he was saying by that in the sense that, I'm a photographer. It's the same to what Abby was speaking to. It's just like, is she a female artist? Is she a Black woman artist? Is she an artist? I see her as an artist that happens to be female. And so I think that, that dynamic in being a photographer, I didn't think about that in terms of the work, but I am trying to extend the language of what it means to be a photographer. I'm trying to free, the photograph out of its frame in a sense. And so exploring different mediums, and I can say this, with photography, specifically in the Atlanta market, what I found was, I have my camera in my bag. I usually have a camera with me. But what I found in terms of what I was trying to say, all the complex ideas and conceptual thinking that I was trying to bring to the medium, for the viewing public, there was a limit. There was a limit to how they were receiving it. And so that's when I decided to experiment and to bring the mixed media and text and alternative photography, all of those things. So there's an interesting dynamic that happens. I remember in art school, one of my teachers saying, like, if you go to someone's house and look at a painting, and it's just like, oh, that's a painting of Stephanie, and when you see a photograph, you say that's Stephanie. So there's this separation of like, well, this is something else. This is pointing to the idea of Stephanie, and that is her. And I think that's a really interesting, it's an interesting dynamic that happens in photography. And I'm interested in the process of photography versus painting. Like, I love painting, but painting is, you have a blank canvas, and it's this very additive process, and you bring your imagination to it. And I love photography and the fact that it's more subtractive, and so you're looking at the world and saying, like, well, what's really not important? It's just this thing that I'm going to focus on. And so I really, I never forget that part of it. And so even when I'm doing the mixed media part, that dynamic is still there. You know, I'm trying to focus down on all of the things that are happening, you know, like, and reducing it to, but I want you to focus on this. And so I hope that answered the question.
I think so.
Okay.
Do you feel, I'm interested in what you were saying about that ability, kind of how you've switched up your process to kind of challenge the way that people are also looking at it. Do you feel like that was successfove? Is that something that you know, like you're encouraged to do?
Yeah, I think it was. I mean, I absolutely love the photographic process of just, you know, taking a camera, like taking this machine and then creating poetry and putting, you know, having a print and framing it and popping on the wall, like the photographs in this room. Like I love that process, but I feel that, you know, so for what I'm noticing, I've gone through so many iterations of, you know, my own identity as a photographer and as an artist, but it's like you will see less of that on my website. Like you'll see less of that on my website, but I have thousands of, you know, like of images of that. I mean, we were early at the fair, we ran into Nina Freeland's amazing jazz artist. I don't know if she's in the room, but she was walking around the fair, and I'm like, Nina Freeland, like, and I have like hundreds of pictures of her because I shot, you know, like images for the Atlanta Jazz Festival for years, and then when I would go back home to New York, I would shoot at Blue Note, and, you know, all of these places, and so, and looking at, you know, just the style of the old black and white photograph of Billie Holiday or Miles Davis, like, those are amazing, you know, those are amazing, but I feel that, you know, like for what I'm trying to say, I mean, even, you know, it's just like I've exhibited those jazz photos, but I'm doing a whole new body of work that's even pushing that. Like I'm using that, you know, my standard photos and trying to just push it. So I've been more successful with what I want to say and having people interact with the work by really shutting down the idea that they're just going to deal with this as a photograph. And I think that on some level, I think that, you know, like cell phone photography, like photographs aren't necessarily precious anymore.
Right.
You know, so it's just like,
They're abundant.
yeah. And, you know, and in my process, a lot of the photographs that I'm using that you all see in the show are, you know, from my family archives, my grandmother's, and she went under a box, you know, went under a bed, pulled out a shoebox and said, here, this is a 70-year-old photograph. If I asked everyone in this room to show me a photograph from 2 weeks ago, you'd see find it, you know, so it's like, it's really not, photographs aren't that precious anymore. And so I'm trying to also bring back, you know, the preciousness that this is, we need to value this.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Gregory. All right, so in your work, we find these constructed compositions that create patterns and maybe even messages to dissect. Can you tell us more about how you encourage viewers to search and consider new perspectives through your work and your compositions?
Well, first of all, it's not for everyone. It's, you know, some of these, I construct these ideograms that I use, and I tell stories that I want certain people to hear, you know. I draw from the tradition of like slave quilts. I draw from the tradition of collaging, black collage. But there's an underlying nuance to my work where there is, I have a certain audience that I'm seeking. So that should be stated.
Yeah.
But how I go about creating these images is I do a lot of research. I spend a lot of time in libraries all over the place. And luckily I was born in the age of the iPhone. You know, I pillage images from the best museums and put my phone right up to the glass and click. get material in that way. But I'm proud of the fact that that I am adverse to this, these systems that oppress us and control everything.
Yeah.
And one of the ways that they do that the most is through the history and through media. For some reason, everyone keeps calling me Bob Marley. It's like that media perceives us. You know what I mean? So it's I find that really interesting. But yeah, I just slowly gather these images and learn as much as I can.
Yeah.
And internalize it sometimes, so that's hard too, because people don't even know what happened. But yeah, I think slowly is how we craft these images.
But then we get to see like your reinterpretation of all of that research and those narratives that you're taking in, almost even for us to then like present it in a new way, which I think is really fascinating.
Many of these things they don't want people to ever know about, right? And that's why, they stole all the art and, called it stupid, Yeah.
No, it's real though.
No, it's very real. That's what happened.
Yep.
And things are looking up, I heard that some of the Benin sculptures are headed back home. But, this is the fight that we've been fighting, So, I hope that helps.
Yeah. I do have a follow-up question in regards to, I really appreciate you stating that, the work's not for everyone. And I think specifically in the context of a international art fair like this, right? I think that sometimes there's this expectation, right? That like you're kind of going around and you're these galleries are presenting works that foreigners are going to relate to, and everyone's going to come to this work with different preconceived notions and things like that. So just how are you navigating that as an artist, knowing that, all of, your unintended audience might be looking at it and your intended audience might be looking at it. Does that impact what and where you show, or do you just feel like it's just presenting what you do and what you do best?
I can't let that affect what I'm going to show, but who said it best? I think it's Pusha T. If you know, you know.
If you know, you know.
You look at these things and I could just see people's eyes light up.
Yeah.
And I'm even lucky to see that, right? Because most of the time, it's like I'm never going to be there for that moment. But people are drawn to certain, brands. Like I use Newport cigarette carton boxes and Newport advertisements to create paintings on sometimes. And just to see, like people in the hood see a Newport painting or something that has to do with Newport, in this kind of context inside a museum or inside a gallery or something like that. I think that's something that should be stated too, like how it brings a certain level of comfort.
Yeah.
And
recognition, like being seen in a space that you might not have felt comfortable in.
For sure. I'm from Houston, Texas. The pillar, the patron saint of our community is John Biggers. He's a great artist, but he wasn't even allowed to go into the museum. He won a contest and they're like, we'll mail you your check. So this type of public affirmation of our culture, I think is necessary. Even if the some of the others don't understand what that means, the opportunity for them to try is there. Kind of put everything on an even playing field. Like my culture isn't below anyone else's. as a matter of fact, it's like,
Louder for the ones in the back.
so,
Yeah. I think each of you provide a different type of affirmation for people who see your work. Whether it's the country that you're from, or the city that you're from, or the neighborhood that you're from, and even the things that you're researching. So whether it's like personal lived experience or these histories that you all are drawing from, or even like the history of your family. I think that you are all, like all of your works are just hanging affirmations to be discovered.
it's the highest praise.
All right, Mr. Paku. Oh, sorry, Dr. Paku. All right, so in this new series, the viewer finds the figure, yourself, almost veiled. There's kind of an interesting perspective of some of the compositions. It's like breaking through or to something or even from something. Can you tell us more about the expressions depicted and the various reads on the work that you're presenting this time?
Yes, I pulled out my phone because I wanted to make a reference to this quote from James Baldwin that it says, "Any real change implies the breakup of the world as one has always known it, the loss of all that gave one an identity, the end of safety. And at such a moment, unable to see and not daring to imagine what the future will now bring forth, one clings to what one knew, to what one possessed or dreamed that one possessed. Yet it is only when a man is able, without bitterness or self-pity, to surrender a dream he has long cherished or a privilege he has long possessed, that he is set free. He has set himself free for higher dreams and for greater privileges." And this is a really powerful sentiment in this idea that I thought as it relates to being Black, right? Because so much of what we know about ourselves as Black people are ideas that are imposed on us, or ideas that we inherit, right? It's not something that we actively sat around and said, this is what Black is going to be. We just kind of got thrown into it and we got to make sense of it as we go along, right? But even in that, there is a degree of like comfort and safety, even in the trauma of it, even in the tragedy of it, right? Like there's a kind of knowing that makes you feel like, okay, well, as long as I just, keep quiet, as long as I comply, as long as, I don't trouble the waters, I'll be okay. But that's not freedom, that's not liberation, that's not being, right? And so like this idea of trying to embrace danger, to risk safety, to take off these layers of knowing, to take off these layers of understanding, to really interrogate who we are and what our Blackness means, not only as individuals, but collectively, is something that I'm really fascinated by. Especially, in light of like, say, 2020, we can talk about George Floyd and, go all the way back through the history of the United States and talk about all of these moments of like, tragedy, with that relate to Black people's bodies and violence, right? And I remember having a conversation with Ebony Patterson, who's a really fantastic artist of Jamaican descent, and asking her in the future what she wanted people to say about her work. And she was like, I don't want my work to matter in the future, right? Because she does so much work responding to the trauma that Black people experience, that she doesn't want that to be relevant, 50 years from now. And that stuck with me, and it made me really question the ways in which I was also responding through my work and reacting to the experience of being Black. And so this series that I'm doing now, The End of Safety, is about trying to remove all of those things that I thought I knew about myself to discover who I can be.
Love that. This is great. All these things are going to segue to these next couple questions. But I'd love to hear from all of you. So let's just start with this exhibition in particular. Now we've got a group of artists from the States, right? So there's this American perspective that your works portray how being Black can be unified. But that is different outside of the United States of America. So how do you see that differently through an international lens. So how are you viewing Blackness and Black identity in that concept of being Black through an international lens?
They say when you stay ready, you gotta get ready, right? Now, for me, I think, international travel has allowed for, perspectives that I've had of my Black identity or of a broader Black identity to just be exponentially infinite. Like it just continues to expand in all these different ways. And so, traveling, there's a kind of familiarity and a foreignness at the same time. It's like, I don't speak that language, but I know that sense. You know what I mean? Like, I don't practice that religion, but the way that they are moving, the way that they are singing together, like I feel that resonates in my core, right? And so it becomes this thing that, again, it forces you to move beyond this idea of a kind of essential Blackness, like Black is this, to understand that Black is this, like it's everything. It's one thing and it's all the other things at the same time. But it's through like travel, it's through contact with other people who are having really different kinds of Black experiences, right? That you begin to see Black is not just a skin color, right? It's not just a racial identity, it's a way of thinking. It's a way of being, it's a way of resisting, it's a way of, surviving, it's a way of evolving, it's a way of elevating. And that for me is a beautiful thing. So I actually seek that out. Like I want to go as many places as I can and discover as many Blacks as I can.
So I have the unique experience of being an international person who now lives in America, and the reason it took me so long to respond to your question is because the first emotion I had was sadness, because I remember when the insurrection happened last year, January 6th, and thinking about like where would I go to feel safe as a Black woman. And I was like, okay, we can go back home to Nigeria. Psych. Not doing that. They still oppress women there. And women like me, we would not go well. And then so it was like, where next? And I recently read the UN had said, this was many years ago, but it still rings true, that there is no region, space, city, country, place on the planet where women are can live free of violence. Like they can just enjoy their lives and prejudice and have opportunities, right? So when I was creating the work, like I know I'm talking about myself, but because I know that the Black experience is the same for the most part, as far as like the struggle everywhere, I think that that's the reason I feel like people can look at all of our works and like at least get something from it. But yeah, internationally, it's you're still Black. You're still a Black person. Colonialism, they did a really good job, and I don't even know if they intended for it to have such a lasting.
Oh, they did.
Like mastermind. Like it's so devious, right? Like
The darkest of
there's so many people currently suffering because of the decision somebody made 400 or 500 years ago, and that to me is ridiculous. But yeah, that's my little rant.
Yeah, I would say that one it's a really interesting question that I've thought about a lot. But I would say, thinking about who I am as a Black person in the States, like in America, I really didn't get a broader perspective of what that meant until I left America. So my first trip out of the country was to Europe. Like it was Czech Republic, and it was really interesting to me because it was this was years ago, but it was really interesting to me because it was shortly after I think communism fell in Czechoslovakia. I was on this this photo residency program through college, and the Czechs really didn't have the context of, you know, my black to their white. You know, it was like, you're American, you know, and that's awesome. Like, you know, it's just like, you're American. So they didn't necessarily have that. And so after that, you know, it's like anytime I travel outside of the States, it's like a lot, you know, many times, like one, you know, the people that I would run into, it's just like, oh, you're American? And I would run into definitely folks from the continent, like other black folks from the continent. It was not, you know, like very few, very rare was I bumping into Americans, but I realized in that sense that for me, you know, if I became a billionaire, I would like send every black person in America, like when they're 5 outside of the country, to get the context of what it means to be black globally, you know, and you know, instead of you know, just in the States, because there is a narrative that you know, there's oppression everywhere, you know, and I think that there's oppression everywhere, but I think that there's a specific narrative that I think black folks deal with in our blackness in America, and there's a weight that we carry, and it's limiting. Like I'm also a teacher, and I remember this story. I'll tell you all this story. I was co-teaching with a white woman, and this little girl. She's 5th grade at the time I was teaching, and she's like, "What does the word minority and majority mean?" And you know, the white teacher's like, "Well, yeah, well, you know, it's like black people are 12%," and you know, she's breaking down, you know, these, you know, mathematical sciences, and I said, "Yeah, that's also true," but I told her, I said, if you walked out of this room and circumnavigated the globe, most of everyone you run into would look like you. So that, you know, it's a completely different perspective. And so it's just like, if we limit ourselves, you know, even thinking of the word like I'm a minority in America, you know, it's just like, but, you know, thinking about that, you know, in context or next to white, but it's just like, well, really, on the planet, you're the minority. You know, it's just like most of the planet is like some brown or black, you know, black folks. And so I think that for me, it really, you know, leaving the States, it gave me that kind of just like this beyond that simplistic definition. You know, it's like I have another dynamic that happened. So, you know, like I was at a dinner, and it was an international dinner, a bunch of artists, friends, you know, from different parts of the continent and the world, and sitting next to this sister from Ethiopia, and she's like, can I ask you, you know, an uncomfortable question? I was like, yeah, what's up? She's like, why do black people wear the Africa symbol? You know, like why do Americans wear that? And I said, well, you know, it's just like, it's difficult to say, you know, it's like where we're from, and, you know, it's Atlantic slave trade and all. She's like, she pulls out this chain, and it's the map of Ethiopia. She's just like, I'm Ethiopian. You know, it's like, I don't claim the entire continent, I'm Ethiopian. And I said, we don't have that luxury, you know, like we don't have that luxury, so we're claiming all of it. Ethiopian, we're Egyptian, we're, you know,
Somewhere there.
yeah, we're claiming all of it. And so I think that, but I say that to say that once I left the States, like for what she was saying, I'm like, wow, like on some level, like the Europeans were looking at me like, well, yeah, you're not black, you're American. And I'm like, well, tell America that. You know what I mean? Because it's like I have to preface that with I'm African American, you know. And so I had this joke with my friends. I'm like, yeah, after that conversation, I was like, I'm a neoclassical African. African American, I'm a neoclassical African. So it's an interesting, it really is an interesting context. But for black folks, you know, like we have to leave there. We have to see beyond the narrative, you know. And the history's real, and the trauma's real, you know, and the triumph is real. But we have to leave there to see how big we are, you know.
Come on,
I
Houston.
love leaving America. Spend as much time as I can out of that job. I don't know. I think you can learn from everywhere, though. But I think you're right, Michael. We need to shape our own narratives, right? I was laughing about it, talking with someone at the foundation a few days ago about the scene from The Godfather when he's walking in Italy and the GIs roll past on the road and they just start yelling the only English names that they know, like Rita Hayworth, you know, Clark Gable, you know, and it's that sort of thing, you know, like our image has been crafted, and it's, I mean, this internet, no man, it's the most powerful thing I've ever seen. You know, it's like, it is relentless. It is awake when we are sleeping, you know, and it is, you know, shaping this world. And I think a lot about that. But you're right. We have to go to these places and eat food and experience these cultures and, you know, learn that we're all going through a lot of the same things. You know, I think that would, you know, do wonders for Black people.
Yeah. We have time. Okay. Does anybody in the audience have any questions? Tracy.
So how have your experience being here in Marrakesh and Morocco impacted your work?
I'm just going to repeat this to everybody. So how have your experiences being here in Marrakesh, Morocco impacted your work since you all, you know, were residents? And how long have you been here for?
We all have been here for a residency, and last year, I think Fam has been more times than all of us. But to answer your question, Morocco is one of these. How long have people been in Morocco? Like half a million years? Like I saw an article about the Venus of Tantan that they found. It was essentially a much older Venus of Willendorf. You know, they say it's between 300,000 and half a million years old. So there's that. People been here surviving for a very long time, so I think they might have learned a few things, you know, but, you know, we're concerned with our story and our, you know, slavery, which was terrible. You know, it lasted, you know, oppression lasted for 400 or 500 years, but before that even kicked off, you know, there was 1,000 years of slavery before that, you know, horrible, you know, but it's like, places like Marrakesh help put those things in perspective, you know. We are all people trying to navigate all of this stuff as best as we can, but where I'm from, they just completely fabricate the history, you know, to control the people. And it's harder to do here. You know, there's objects everywhere. I said that I was making relics. When I got here, I turned all the way up. You know, there's stuff everywhere. So I work into pre-existing objects. You know, this place is fascinating.
Yeah, I think, so it opened my eyes, right? I feel like when I came here, I thought I knew something. And just seeing all the architecture, the details is what blows me away about this place. It's magical. And I found myself wanting to put more detail in my work. I remember talking with Pahome about the first painting that I finished, and at first I just had her wearing this kind of like plain, like a white dress. And I was like, I think I should add some like patterns or something. Mom was like, yeah, you should definitely do that. And so it made me realize that because the work I do now is very dense. And I think at one point I was scared of dense work, and because I just was like, am I overpowering people? Is it on? No, it just died.
That's that power. It's
Okay. And yeah, so I felt like I was overwhelming people, but like seeing this maximalist kind of whole city, whole place where they're just like, there's not enough beads, there's not enough gold, there's not enough tile. Really made me feel like, no, like be yourself, like just like don't make work that you think people want to see, like just make what you want to make, and you'll find your people. So I would say Morocco changed me in that way.
Yeah, for me as a painter, it's really inspired by color here. There's a really beautiful and bold aesthetic in terms of like color in a place that can largely be very monotone because it's a lot of sand. In contrast, buildings and structures get these like really bold, brilliant, almost fluorescent colors, that really kind of stand out, and that really struck me. Something that I've been doing in my work for a while, which is contrasting the black skin against like bold colors, but there are very specific colors here that I think I was very responsive to and began to incorporate into my work. And like Abby, going through the Medina, navigating the souks and going on the back roads of the souks and seeing the artisans work and the type of effort and the craft that goes into it. Like it really forces you to like step your game up. Like how far can I, like this dude is literally doing this with a string and his toe and he's carving, like these like really intricate patterns. Like I can push myself a little bit more.
Yeah, I would say that it's affected my work. It was interesting. We were just having this conversation yesterday. My residency was a month and a half in 2021, and when I came to the residency, I had no idea what I would do. Like I had no idea like what type of work am I going to do, and so realizing that a lot of my work is so technologically front-loaded, which is mean I'm creating a lot of sketches and things on a computer and iPad, and then going analog. There were some limitations, like being in my studio, and so that ended up being an amazing kind of conundrum because I was able to then absorb Morocco. I was really able to absorb Morocco, and what I realized, and this was like really serendipitous, it was a beautiful epiphany, is that I used a lot of sacred geometry in my work and circular patterns and lines and details, and looking in this room, it's and looking around Morocco, like it's like this feels so familiar to me. This feels so familiar. Like I've used that pattern in my work. And initially, when I started my work, it really wasn't, okay, I'm going to look at, Islamic architecture and sacred geometry. I didn't really, it's just like I was just drawn to it and started to, it just made sense to me to put that in the work to represent the complexity, of what I'm trying to speak to the work. But looking around, it's just like I went bananas, just like seeing, it's like, I couldn't stop taking pictures. I mean, we were talking yesterday, she's like, oh my God, like, you documented this thing for all of us. And so it really, for me, it was familiar in a way. And I can't say that it, like my work that I made in the residency, in my opinion, looks like I made it in Morocco. There's remnants and just the beautiful residue of Morocco you'll see in the work, and I'm doing that same work now in my studio in the States, but it's different. It's very different, and I do, Abby and I were having this conversation yesterday. It's just like, I'm doing different work. She's doing different work. My work is a little more adjacent, I would say, than you know, to the stuff that I did here. But it's just like I'm doing something different now, and I like the direction that it's taken. So looking back at that work now and looking at the difference, I'm like, wow, like Morocco was in me, like it was in my bloodstream, you know, and I like that. Yeah, so it did affect me.
I just wanted to ask a question. How did your experience in residencies, how did your body's relationship or your relationship to rest, to resting, to feeling rested while you created inform or help your imagination to create the products? And more specifically, or in addition, coming from the context of the settler colonial US and those of us who, how does that difference?
I'll go first because I did about rest. So I was laughing. Like my entire series is about resting. And I'm also laughing for an additional reason because I, during the residency, and I wish Estelle was here because she'd be laughing at me. I worked myself almost to death. And the irony of, you know, working on a series about Black women resting and me literally like having to like take a week off because of the heat and the fact that I was working on these long hours, and Estelle was like, do you know that the art is not going anywhere? you can just take breaks. And my background is from corporate America. I was actually a director of investor relations up until 2018, and then I left to become an artist. So that was 5 years ago this month. And I'm still learning how to rest. I'm still learning that resting is okay. I grew up in a household where if you were doing nothing, you were in trouble. So I struggle with doing nothing. I struggle with it during the residency. I struggled with it even as a topic in the paintings. Like who is allowed to rest? Who is allowed to be soft? Who's allowed to do all these like good things we associate as good? It's still a struggle. It's still something that I'm working on, and it's it's there. Yeah.
Anybody else want to respond to that?
Yeah, I can respond to it. I would say, you know, like just the basics of doing a residency, like leaving one's life, you know, the normal things that you do in life, you know, it's just like paying your mortgage or, you know, like all the things that you're doing in your real life, and then leaving that and coming into an intentional focused space. And you know, I could say at Jarton Root and Montresso, like there are so many things, you know, Abby and I were talking, it's like, you know, what are you telling artists? Like, what's the best way to express the experience that we just had? And she's like, I just tell them it's artist Disney World. Yeah, that's good, fair enough. You know, because it, you know, like you're being fed. You know, it's like there's just so many of the normal things in life that are being taken care of that you can just focus on your art. You know, you can really just focus on your art, and you know, like the whole. You know, sleep part. There were days where I was in the studio, and I'd like wait. I was like, wow, I've been doing art for 11 hours straight. Like I've been doing art for 11, you know. Or there was one day Estelle came into the studio, and I was just like on the couch. It was hot that day. Like my shirt off, just sleep on the couch, just exhausted, just from the heat. But it is, it's you know, like different things will come out of you when. You know, all of the, you know, I'd say not bad, you know, barriers, but just the logistics of life are kind of just like, you know, moved out of your way, and you have this intentional, focused space. And so it really did, being there, like I took that, of course, you know, a lot of the thinking and a lot of what happened to me in the residency, I took that back to the States in my own studio practice. And so, you know, and finding the work-life balance of, you know, like being in the studio, like it was really helpful. Yeah.
We have time for one or two more.
Question.
Yes.
I'm going to take Jodine and then your question.
My question is real simple. I just wanted to know more about Adama. You mentioned earlier, like what is that and what is it about, and can you share more light to that?
Sure. I'm going to take her question first, and then I'm going to close with that.
Close with it? All right, perfect.
Okay, so my question is, we talked about the connection between being from the US, being black and from the US, and then Europe. And I would like to know, how is your understanding about the networks within the art world between black people in the US and Europe? And do you have the feeling that you know who's out there, who sits in the museums, who are the other artists? Is there anything where you work on that, or we have an understanding where you feel that you build up through that?
This art world is a small place. So, you know, few folks here, few there. But it's really about just building relationships when you can. You know, I wouldn't think it's much, for me, it's been much more than that.
Yeah, I would say, shout out to Instagram. There has been some really, I've been showing my work in Europe, and particularly in Paris, for over 10 years. And every time I go, I get introduced to a new community of artists and creators, oftentimes expanding, the entirety of the African diaspora. And oftentimes sparked by contact from Instagram. A few months ago, I was in London, and I was sitting in a restaurant having a coffee, just kind of sitting in the window, and this lady walked by, and she stopped. She was staring. She was like, mouthing to me, like, "You're Fahamu." And I'm like, yeah, so she came in, we had a conversation. There's another curator who's based in London who was like, "Oh, I see from Instagram that you're in London. I want to arrange studio visits for you with artists here in London." And so we spent the whole day just bouncing around to different artist studios. And, again, just, this idea, I think, of Blackness is something that is an automatic invitation into, the intimacy of communities, right? Black artists around the world. I've had conversations with Black artists from all over the planet in different cities around the world. And the conversation typically is the same thing. We're fighting for the same things. We're challenged by the same things. We're aspiring to the same things, right? And that's part of the reason that I wanted to start Adama, right? It was everywhere I go, we're having these conversations. Let's create a space where people can go to actually do that, real time, all the time. So, because I think to everyone's point on the panel, sometimes we feel isolated and we feel like we're in these silos, and our struggle is this struggle, and it's so desperate and nobody's supporting us. And then you realize, people in Barcelona are having the same conversation. People in Rio are having the same conversation. And when you realize you have this community that empowers you, not only does it affirm you, but it empowers you to do even more.
Just to piggyback off what Fahamu said, Instagram has been the great equalizer, at least for me. I have friends internationally that I still haven't met, but I talk to every day. And it's weird, some of them I do finally meet, and you hug them, and you're like, this is my first time ever meeting you, and the first thing I want to do is hug you like I've known you forever. And yes, so shout out to you were saying earlier that the internet is really powerful, and I think you meant it in a very neutral but leaning more negative way. But I with anything that's that powerful, Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility, and so you can use it to your advantage. I use Instagram to my advantage. So that's how I make my money. And other artists, you complain about it and all that good stuff, and I'm like, yeah, it's horrible, but it gives you access to the globe. It gives you access to thousands of people who would never know that you were there, and it can connect you to communities where you can realize that you're not alone. You have peers.
Yeah, I would say the same thing about Instagram and social media and fairs like Art Fair 154. This has been amazing, and it's been several artists that I've been following for years, and then finally met them here. You know, it's like, oh yeah, I've already followed, I know you, you know, so it's like, you know, it's been wonderful.
And we're truly just highlighting that everywhere you go on this planet, you are going to find another person of African descent that you can relate to, that might affirm you and your lived experience. And we're hoping to, we are actively bringing that to community in Atlanta. So yeah, feel free to check us out online.